Was the inheritance of Victoria Withers, adaptation of the podcast Unfinished Ernie's Secret. Join us Sunday evening at 6 here on 90.7 WFAE. This is All Things Considered from NPR News on WFAE. I'm Gwendolyn Glenn. The government has proposed a new rule banning non-compete agreements, calling them exploitive. Many workers would agree. Still, some companies say they are necessary to protect trade secrets. And President Biden welcomes Japan's Prime Minister at the White House. Those stories after the news.
Live from NPR News in Washington, I'm Jack Speer. President Biden will deliver his State of the Union address early next month. NPR's Franco Ordonez reports the White House has accepted the House Speaker's invitation to speak before a joint session of Congress on February 7th.
The new Republican Speaker, Kevin McCarthy, formally invited President Biden to deliver his State of the Union address. In a letter, McCarthy writes that the American people sent them to Washington to deliver the direction of the country, find common ground, and debate their priorities. White House Press Secretary Karine Jean-Pierre said Biden appreciated the invitation.
So we have received Speaker McCarthy's kind invitation, and the President has accepted it. And looks forward to delivering the State of the Union.
This will be the President's first appearance before a new Republican-led House, which is focused on blocking his agenda. Franco Ordonez, NPR News, the White House.
Ukraine is denying Russia's assertion troops loyal to the Kremlin are in control of a salt-mining town in eastern Ukraine. Charles Maines has more from Moscow.
Russian Defense Ministry spokesman Igor Konashenko said Russian forces established full control over Soledar overnight, calling the, quote, liberation of the town important for the success of Russia's wider push to control the Donetsk region. The spokesman credited the Russian armed forces' massed firepower for the victory, even as Ukraine insisted fighting in Soledar was ongoing. The spokesman also notably made no mention of contributions from the Russian mercenary force, the Wagner Group. Wagner's founder, Yevgeny Prigozhin, claimed his fighters had single-handedly captured Soledar earlier in the week. Infighting between Prigozhin and the Defense Ministry's top brass is believed to have played a role in a shake-up in command over Russia's armed forces in Ukraine, announced Wednesday. Charles Maines, NPR News, Moscow.
About 1% of all mail-in ballots cast during the 2022 midterms were rejected. That's according to a state-by-state analysis. NPR's Ashley Lopez reports the rejection rate is on par with past elections, even though there have been changes to vote-by-mail laws.
Hundreds of thousands of mail ballots were rejected during the last election, according to preliminary state-by-state data. Many of those ballots were turned in late or had problems with the voter signature or identification. The rejection rate for mail ballots in the U.S. has hovered around 1% for the past few elections now. That's despite the fact that more people have been voting by mail since the pandemic, says Sylvia Albert with Common Cause.
You know, even though we saw a lot of states expand access, we also saw other states restrict access.
More data on mail ballot rejection is expected in a federal report later this year. Ashley Lopez, NPR News.
Some of the country's biggest banks are coming out with their fourth quarter earnings numbers. JP Morgan Chase says for the 3 months ending December, it saw earnings rise by 6%. Bank of America also says its fourth quarter earnings were up slightly from a year ago. On Wall Street, stocks closed higher, the Dow up 112 points. This is NPR.
This is WFAE News. I'm Gwendolyn Glenn. The drive for clean water and air for minority and low-income residents is linked to the march toward racial equality that the Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. championed. U.S. Environmental Protection Agency Administrator Michael Regan told North Carolina state employees today. Regan, a Goldsboro native and Governor Roy Cooper's former Environment Secretary, delivered the keynote address to hundreds attending the annual King Day State Workers Observance at a downtown Raleigh church. The slain civil rights leader was born 94 years ago on Sunday. Reagan became President Joe Biden's head of EPA in early 2021. Cooper introduced Reagan at the service, praising him for helping position the state as a leader in environmental justice, while Department of Environmental Quality Secretary. Crime statistics and police case closure rates for the years 2018 through 2022 in the town of Matthews are being corrected according to a news release from town officials today. They say the corrections are being made following an 8-month internal personnel investigation completed in December. The report found that cases were categorized as closed using means inconsistent with state, federal, and department reporting standards. Matthews town manager Becky Hawk directed the investigation.
What they're seeing right now, they haven't quite finalized that data, but anecdotally, we're looking at really minor changes. And so maybe something was larceny and it should have been a shoplifting, but you're not looking at kind of major differences in any of those statistics that would cause us to have alarm or say, oh my gosh, we had this giant misunderstanding of what that data actually looked like.
Investigators also found that Matthews' annual police department crime stat reports were not based on consistent use of FBI reporting standards. Police officials say steps are being taken to ensure future crime statistics and case dispositions are accurate, which includes increased training and review procedures. It's 47 degrees in Charlotte. This is WFAA News.
Support for NPR comes from NPR stations. Other contributors include the Katina Foundation, supporting the Asylum Seeker Advocacy Project, providing more than 100,000 asylum seekers in the U.S. with community and legal support. Learn more at asylum.news.
From NPR News, this is All Things Considered. I'm Juana Summers.
And I'm Mary Louise Kelly. What do jealousy, power struggles, and political infighting have to do with Russia's strategy in Ukraine? Well, possibly quite a bit. That's according to security experts who point to a key shift for Russia this week. The Kremlin has named General Valery Gerasimov as the new overall commander of the war. Now, might a new leader signal new tactics? Here to talk through the change and the palace intrigue behind it is Dara Masiko. She's a senior policy researcher at the RAND Corporation and a former senior analyst on Russian military capabilities for the Pentagon. Dara, welcome.
Thank you so much for having me.
All right, I want you just to briefly sketch out General Gerasimov's bio for us. Who is he?
General Gerasimov is the Chief of General Staff. Roughly, he's equivalent to General Milley here in Washington, D.C. He has been in that position for about 10 years.
Okay, so he's the most senior military officer that Russia has, right?
He is. He's their top officer. The only two people above him are the Russian defense minister and the Russian president.
Okay. And I wonder if on any level this is surprising that he's now been put in charge of the war, because he was among those who were blamed for some big setbacks, at least early on.
That's exactly right. It is really surprising that they're giving him another opportunity to command this war. It is rumored that he and a very small group of officials were responsible for planning the invasion, largely in secret from the rest of the military, leading to significant losses early on in materiel and manpower. So it's very unusual that they're giving him another go at this. It's even more unusual because Surovikin has not made huge mistakes in the 3 months that he's been in control of the overall.
Surovikin, we should say, this is the general who Gerasimov is replacing.
Yes. General Sergei Surovikin. He was named the commander of the war effort in October, and he had previously led the operational group in the south, down in Kherson, which was considered one of the more successful aspects of the invasion.
So why the shakeup? What's the official Kremlin line?
Well, the official Kremlin line is that the special military operation, as they call it, they're still not calling it a war. The explanation is that the tasks are expanding, and so therefore they're going to give it to General Gerasimov because he's a higher command, and it really needs that level of oversight to ensure coordination. And that's the very staid official line of what's happening here. But it is a highly unusual move to have someone as senior as him running the day-to-day operations of this war. And so my belief is that this is some kind of political infighting going on, and as a result of factions that are fighting with each other within the overall effort.
Speak to that a little bit more. What makes you think that?
So Surovikin is a very popular individual in the Russian military world. He is a very large personality, and I want to note that he's a hard man in a system that produces hard. He has a reputation of being very brutal.
His nickname is General Armageddon, right?
Yes, but he has a bit of a following because he gets results. So again, with all situation going on behind the scenes.
It does seem worth noting Putin subbed out his commander just in October. Here we are in January. 3 months later, he's subbing out the commander again. Does it speak to, use the word desperation, does it speak to that perhaps Vladimir Putin knows the war isn't going well and he's throwing whatever and whoever he can?
I think that's a really good observation. To me, it seemed like they have been a little adrift strategically, not really knowing where they go from here. When I look at the Russian front line and what they have to use, I don't really see a force that's truly capable of a large-scale offensive that would be successful. And so it could very well be that this leadership change is casting about a bit for a way forward that will work.
Put today's headline in context. We're hearing about fierce fighting for control of the town of Soledar. There are conflicting accounts from Russia and Ukraine, as on many things, over whether this town is now fully under Russian control. But does it speak to pressure on General Gerasimov coming in? You gotta win something. You gotta win something fast.
That may well be true. And the fighting around Bakhmut and Soledar has just been raging for months. But again, in the overall context here and how this is going, these are destroyed small towns. They have been subjected to excessive shelling. For that to be claimed as a success, I think tells you a lot about where the Russian operation is at this point.
One question that's run throughout this war is whether a desperate Putin might escalate, might use tactical nuclear or chemical weapons on the battlefield. Does having General Gerasimov in charge make that any more or any less likely?
Well, this is one of the concerns that I have about Gerasimov and about Shoigu.
Shoigu, the defense minister.
My concerns about escalation are this. Even though Gerasimov has always been the #1 official throughout the entire war, by demoting a voice like Surovikin and others who may believe in a different way forward for the Russian army, if that order were to come down, we're losing, I don't have options, I need something quick, I don't think that Gerasimov and Shoigu are the ones that will stand up and say no. They are yes men. But we're not there. There's several steps in the escalation ladder before those kind of things start to happen.
That's terrifying. What are the checks then?
Yes, so there's several steps that would happen before a nuclear weapon. It could be things like signaling attacks against the satellite constellation. It could be attacks that start to happen outside of Ukraine, threats to do so. It wouldn't necessarily be a bullet.
Gary Mastico, she is Senior Policy Researcher at the Rand Corporation. Thank you.
Thanks so much for having me.
You might not realize it, but you may be subject to something called a non-compete. 1 in 5 workers in the U.S. are thought to have signed agreements limiting what they can do after they leave their jobs. Some employers say non-competes are needed to keep workers from running off with trade secrets, but the government has proposed banning them, calling them exploitive. And as NPR's Andrea Hsu reports, many employees would agree.
Joby George was just out of college when he got a job with a software company focused on the pharmaceutical industry.
I was around 21 years old, and that was my first job out of college.
He was excited. He liked being part of a company that was helping to make the medicines people take every day. He ended up staying 14 years, at which point he thought, time for a change. That's when he realized he might have a problem.
I don't remember exactly signing a non-compete because there's a lot of forms you have to sign when you get hired.
But sure enough, he had. And his company did not want him going to the new job he had lined up at another software company focused on pharmaceuticals.
I'm excited that it's hard to work on a completely new product that had nothing to do with what I worked on previously.
Joby George fought his old company in court with a lot of support from his new company, and eventually the case was dropped. Others aren't so fortunate. Researchers estimate that some 30 million workers are subject to non-competes, and not just college-educated white-collar workers.
A lot of workers in logistics, security guards, house cleaners, workers at cafeterias.
Naja Farley is with the National Employment Law Project. In her previous role with the New York State Attorney General's office, she worked on one of the most famous non-compete cases against the fast food chain Jimmy John's. She says workers bound by non-competes often can't leave for better-paying jobs. So she's glad the Federal Trade Commission has now moved to ban these agreements because because low-wage workers don't have the means to fight, as Joe George did, or sit on the sidelines while they wait for their non-competes to expire.
You're not going to be able to go back into the workforce with the same power to command like a higher wage if you've been sitting out for a year, not developing your skills.
Robin Catalano faced this problem after quitting her job blogging and managing social media for a home decor company. She had signed a non-compete clause that said if she left, she couldn't work for another home decor company for a year. That was a problem given her expertise.
Working in that kind of an industry, you learn about fabrics, you learn about how textiles are put together, where they're made, the design process.
She says it'd be one thing if she'd been the CEO and was leaving to start up a rival business, but her plan was to become a freelance writer.
You know, I'm a sole proprietor. I am providing for myself and my cats. So, you know, it's not the same.
Nevertheless, Catalano says she's a rule follower. So she didn't pitch herself to the industry she knew so well for a whole year.
That's sort of the critical moment for a new business, right? Those first couple of years is when you're really building your clientele and getting your name out there.
She's nowadays much more careful about what she signs and tries to negotiate out any language restricting her future moves. Now, there are other ways to protect trade secrets. Kevin Bozar is a senior director with Cabins for You, a vacation property management company in the Great Smoky Mountains. He says the company has plenty of confidential information he wouldn't want an employee to walk off with, like their marketing strategies and pricing tools, because competition is stiff.
We're all going after the same property owners to add inventory to our platform, and we're all also going after that same finite group of vacationers who are coming here.
But at Cabins for You, most employees don't have non-competes. Instead, they sign non-disclosure and non-solicitation clauses, which prevent them from divulging company secrets, like client lists. Still, Bozar thinks non-competes may be necessary in places like research institutions, biotech. So,
I would not agree with a blanket, getting rid of all non-competes nationwide for all industry spaces. I think that's being a little short-sighted, because I do believe that there is room for non-competes in a very limited spectrum.
Many companies would agree. The fight over the FTC's proposed ban is expected to be fierce. Andrea Hsu, NPR News.
All Things Considered from NPR News.
With climate change, an accurate forecast matters.
How do we help countries and businesses better manage their weather and climate-related challenges as the weather in the world becomes crazier?
On the next How I Built This, we meet a man who's trying to make weather data more reliable. And the story of how internet cookies evolved into a privacy nightmare. That's coming up on the next Planet Money and How I Built This from NPR.
Sunday mornings at 11, right here on 90.7 WFAE. It's 6:18. Stay with us for more of All Things Considered on 90.7 WFAE. Support comes from WFAE listeners at St. Mary's School, an all-girls college preparatory boarding and day school in Raleigh.
I know where that is.
Girls in grades 9 through 12. Deadline for prospective applicants is January 30th.
You remember that? We used to walk by there.
On the next